I normally like to sit around and chit-chat with you guys till late at night after one of these things, but my college roommate has a layover up at the big airport tonight, so after I do the talk and the Q&A time, I'm going to have to head out, so just apologies ahead of time, and I look forward to catching up with you another time, but he and I only see each other like once a year, so I can't miss this chance to stay in touch. So, we're talking about the end of the world. Specifically, I'm not going to talk about the Mayan things. I don't know anything about that. I mean, seriously, people couldn't figure out the wheel. Like, we're going to take their calendar seriously. So, that, you know, I'm not too concerned about that. But there's apocalypticism has been a huge part of Christianity right from the get-go. And so we're going to spend a little time talking about that tonight. I think, so I'm just going to go through my stuff, and as always, I'd like to do as much Q&A as possible, so feel free to jump in, make comments. I am by no means an expert in this topic at all. I'm just going to tell you what little bit I've been able to glean. I thought I'd start with some just basic vocabulary to make sure we're all on the same page. Some terms we're going to keep using tonight. First of all, the term apocalypse itself actually comes from a Greek word meaning simply a lifting of the veil, a kind of a revelation. Hence the name of the last book of the New Testament, the book of Revelation, not Revelations. Next time one of your believing friends tries to refer to Revelations, correct them. It annoys them to no end. Okay? There's no S on the end of Revelation. But it's, so yeah, we use the word, apocalypse is like some cataclysmic, conflict or violent struggle, but it just means a revealing or an unveiling. And that's why the book of Revelation is the unveiling and the revealing to St. John the Divine on the island of Patmos. So that's where we get that term from. Armageddon, a final cataclysmic battle between the forces of good and evil, forces of good being led by Jesus Christ, forces of evil being led by the Antichrist, Jesus' evil twin brother. Named for a town called Megiddo, and actually comes from, so the idea is that this cataclysmic battle is going to happen on a hill. It's really Harmageddon because the Hebrew word for a hill is har. So I don't know why the H got dropped, but actually I found one Bible translation that uses the H. But anyway, this hill outside the Palestinian town of Megiddo where the final cataclysmic conflict of all time is going to take place. Tribulation, a 7-year period of suffering and distress and famine and mayhem that's going to just envelop the entire planet. That's what we're talking about with tribulation. Rapture, and we're going to come back and hit all these again tonight. I don't need to explain rapture. Christians get sucked up into heaven, you know that one. You've seen the bumper stickers, right? My favorite one being, in case of rapture, may I have your car? And then the millennium, which is the 1,000-year reign of Christ, a time of peace, prosperity, and happiness for the entire planet. And so these are some of the key terms that are kind of at the heart of Christian apocalyptic thinking. Let me just read to you real quick from Revelation chapter 20, because a lot of it comes from this. Really, all the wacky stuff you see out there, like the books at the checkout and the grocery and the magazines and all that, when they claim to have come up with timetables and all that, it's really, out of the 66 books in the Bible, there are really 3 big ones that they're basing everything on. 3 books that have nothing to do with each other. Revelation at the very end, book of Ezekiel that was written 6th century BCE, before Common Era, and then the book of Daniel, written about 2nd century BCE. So we have these kind of books of, Ezekiel's book of prophecy and vision, visionary apocalyptic writings that are written over a period of several centuries that don't have anything to do with each other, but they try to kind of tie them together to come up with the timeline. Here's the basic basic outline that appears in Revelation chapter 20. Now this is John the Divine, who was in exile on the island of Patmos. Anyone been to Patmos? In the, yeah, one has maybe. It's a really cool place. If you ever go on a tour of the Greek islands, you should stop off there. Revelation, has anyone tried to read Revelation ever?
Oh God. Unfortunately.
Yeah, don't do it. It's like life is too short. Don't I'll tell you everything you need to know tonight. It's just it's very hard to make any sense out of it. There's all these just crazy, symbolism and visions, and there is some speculation that the water on Patmos is contaminated with wormwood, which apparently is the active ingredient in absinthe. I mean, they've been speculating, for centuries as to why this was so nutty. So there's a mushroom theory on John. So
some societies had a lot of lead in their water at that time too.
Would lead do it too?
Oh, the water.
Have you tried? Should I know about this? Okay.
They used lead pipes before they figured out, that lead was contaminated.
Yeah. Okay. This is the millennial kingdom in the book of Revelation, chapter 20. So we're near the end of the book, near the very end of the New Testament. Then I saw thrones, and those seated on them were given authority to judge. I also saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their testimony to Jesus. Now he's writing around the time of the Diocletian persecution, which was kind of a short period of intense persecution against Christians. They had not worshipped the beast. What's the number of the beast? 666. We'll get back to that. Or its image, and had not received its mark on their foreheads or on their hands. Remember when the barcode thing came out? Yeah, so some of you don't remember that. Yeah, I remember old price tags, before. Some people thought the barcode was the mark of the beast. Anyway. They came to life and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. That's the millennium, the millennial kingdom. The rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy are those who share in the first resurrection. Over these, the second death has no power. But they will be priests of God and of Christ, and they will reign with him 1,000 years. Next, the final defeat of Satan. When the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be released from his prison and will come out to deceive the nations at the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, in order to gather them for battle. We'll get back to Gog and Magog in a minute, too. They are as numerous as the sands of the sea. They marched up over the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city being Jerusalem. And fire came down from heaven and consumed them, and the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet were, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Well, it gets better, but we don't have enough time for it, so we'll stop there. But did you notice if God could keep Satan in prison for 1,000 years, why does he have to let him out? Just to beat him up again.
You're mistaking, you're looking at religion from a logical point of view. It doesn't work. That's just a question if you hit millennialist friends. Okay, that's what much of this is based on. But it gets where's the idea of the rapture come from? We'll do rapture in a minute. I think I'll hold off on that. We'll come back to that. That's the main deal. You got it? Rapture, Christians get sucked up into heaven. 7 years of tribulation when life is going to be hell on earth, 1,000 years of millennial reign, and then the devil gets released for one final battle, and that's it. And then the second coming, that's when the second coming of Jesus happens, and then the final judgment, and then we're done. The study of end times, is this my official eraser tonight?
Ooh, you know what?
No, it's okay. I mean, it's kind of working. Christians have a word for the study of end times, which makes it sound really like serious. Yeah, scientific. Eschatology, the study of last things. Eschatology. Oh, I found an eraser. Great, thank you. I want to get into kind of the big categories of eschatology that have marked the history of Christian thought. We'll get up to the stuff that you all know and love that we see on television almost daily. I hear it. I was stuck in traffic on the way down. I'm sitting on 59, so I thought, well, I might as well turn on a religious channel to see if I can come up with any new material. For the minute I turn the radio on, there's some dude singing a song about how sad we are that Grandpa is not with us this Christmas, but we shouldn't be sad because he's with Jesus this Christmas. And next year, we may all be with Jesus too. The minute I turn the radio on. Yeah.
Thanksgiving before last, my mom's friend's elderly father gave the grace of Thanksgiving. He was all, okay, Jesus, we're all ready to come, so you can come.
We're all ready to come.
Yeah, we're all
Speak
ready.
for yourself. We're not around. Yeah. Okay. The next groupings of eschatological thought we're going to talk about are all based on, it's all in relation to how you deal with the millennium. There are amillennialists, there are premillennialists, there are postmillennialists. And then even within these categories, there are subgroups. And I'm leaving out a couple because we don't have all night. But those are the big groups. Okay, first, amillennialism. The amillennialists. This has been the standard eschatology for most of Christianity for nearly 2,000 years. This position was first proposed by St. Augustine back in the 4th century Common Era. And when the book of Revelation went in, it almost didn't make the cut. If you came to my talk on canonization and how the Bible came together, you heard me mention how it was really the most controversial. Even back then, there were a lot of people who said, hey, this is just like, I don't see anything in here. It did make it in, but St. Augustine suggested that, well, you need to look at this not literally, but symbolically. And an amillennialist view is marked by a couple main ideas. First of all, so most of the events described in Revelation are either symbolic or they already happened. And if you have some specific questions about that later, we can get into that. I don't know how much you want to deal specifically with Revelation tonight. I'll be happy to handle that. Amillennialists, as you see by the name, don't believe in a future 1,000-year reign. If anything, they think the 1,000-year reign already started and that Christ is already ruling now with his church. So that there's a 1,000-year reign that's already started. It's just like invisible, but it's happening. They are also marked by what we call replacement theology. That is, the promises made to the people of Israel in the Old Testament are kind of done with. They're kind of null and void. And now all those promises have been transferred to the Christian church, which is the quote-unquote New Israel. We get hints of this even in the New Testament because Jesus chooses how many apostles? 12 apostles representing the 12 tribes of Israel, representing the reconstitution of a new Israel. And so replacement theology, which has been the standard line of most Christian thought for 2,000 years, has been that the church is the new Israel. Okay, so amillennialists, no literal reading of Revelation, no 1,000-year kingdom. If anything, the millennium has already kind of begun, we just can't see it yet. But it's manifested in the existence of Christ's church on earth. Next, we have the Postmillennialists. This line of thinking about the end of time emerged in the, and I see an angel of mercy emerging from the, thank you. Thank you so much. Wow.
Can I get a refill?
Now we have vodka. This is going to get better. Okay, postmillennialism emerged in the late part of the 19th century, early part of the 20th century. And this line of thinking about the end of time says that things are getting peachier and peachier. It's a very optimistic view of human progress. The world is getting better and better, and under God's guidance and God's grace and under the work of believers on earth, we're moving the whole thing forward until we reach a time one day when everybody's going to get on board with the program. And someday, the last remaining holdout on earth is going to convert to the gospel, and then that's the beginning of the millennium. So it's not this kind of violent upheaval, it's more this kind of steady progress view. And what was interesting was under the postmillennialist view, because they still take the Bible seriously, even after all this progress and wonderful things happening on earth in the 1,000-year millennium, that's a redundancy, and so you kind of get the image, like someday everyone will just be wearing their WWJD bracelets and we go into potlucks every Wednesday night, for 1,000 years. However, under this model, Satan still needs to get released after his 1,000 years. So they still have the final battle thing going on, and Jesus shows up and kicks Satan's butt, or Beelzebub. Okay. Now, postmillennialism, although it was very popular in the late 1800s, early 1900s, hit kind of a wall with the beginning of World War I, which of course shattered a lot of people's, hopes about the progress of mankind. You have two subsequent world wars, tens and tens of millions of people dead. It doesn't look like humanity is getting any better. So that really kind of created a huge flat tire for postmillennialism. However, and the only reason I bring it up tonight is that it's now undergoing a resurgence. Postmillennialism is back, partly thanks to the Pentecostal movement. Pentecostal movement started when? 1900. The Azusa Street Revival in Los Angeles was the beginning of the Pentecostal movement. Now there are more than 500 million Pentecostal believers on the planet. It is the fastest growing kind of religious manifestation in the world, and it's still thriving, especially in Africa and Latin America.
What exactly is it? The Pentecostal? I mean,
why are they?
What is it?
What? Oh, Pentecostalism. Pentecostalism is it refers to the festival of Pentecost, the day in the book of Acts, 50 days after Jesus was resurrected from the dead, when the Holy Spirit was given to the apostles. And the power of the Holy Spirit was manifested to them in the ability, first of all, to speak in foreign languages, which under Pentecostalism now has become glossolalia, the speaking in tongues. So if you have been to a Pentecostal service, you will see people being overtaken now, but it's like this kind of nonsense. I've been told by people who were Pentecostal that the whole thing is very formulaic. And once you get into the system, you learn how to speak in tongues. And you learn when to do it.
Yes.
You know, it's supposed to be the spontaneous eruption of the Holy Spirit. Well, we're going to have a really fun night. Thanks to all my friends out there who keep buying drinks. Wow. I'll do vodka and scotch. That's great. Okay. And then I'll speak in tongues.
I'll translate.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Does that help you with the whole Pentecostal thing? So it's a very, there's no main huge hierarchy, not a whole lot of emphasis. There's like in formal, the whole thing is, huge emphasis on the personal emotional encounter with the presence of the Holy Spirit in your life. Manifested in speaking in tongues, often in doing miracles, lots of laying on of hands, that kind of stuff. It's the fastest growing thing. Wow.
Are they equivalent to
Great question. Are Pentecostals equivalent to evangelicals? There may be some overlap, but it's not exactly the same thing. There is some overlap. But I wouldn't I'm going to get to the evangelicals in a minute. So hopefully it'll make more sense. Jamie.
Is it what they call the charismatic?
Charismatic is another term for the Pentecostal movement. A lot of mainline denominations, when the Pentecostal movement was erupting, a lot of mainline Christians groups had charismatic movements within their group. For example, there still is an active charismatic Catholic. Now, they still see themselves as Roman Catholics, but it's a charismatic movement within the Roman Catholic Church. So like charismatic groups within the Roman Catholic Church will go somewhere and they will have conferences on the Holy Spirit. I don't know what they talk about, but it's this whole emphasis on kind of this vital living Spirit of God in your life. And there's definitely an anti-intellectualism, huge anti-intellectualism in the Pentecostal thing. Jenny?
I'm just curious about the speaking in tongues thing. You said that there was maybe a formulated
Yes.
deal. So does that mean that it's a real? I thought it was just like words they were making up.
Right. It is. It's not a legit. I've never spoken to a. If I knew, I speak Japanese. So if I ever went to a Pentecostal service and I heard someone who had no knowledge of Japanese whatsoever suddenly spontaneously bursting forth in flawless Japanese, I might pay attention. It's never like that, okay? They never speak in a discernible, which to me is interesting here. I'm not defending the Bible, but even in the initial giving of the Holy Spirit in the book of Acts, the apostles were empowered to preach the gospel in languages that were discernible to the people who were around them in Jerusalem, who had gathered for this great international festival in Jerusalem. So even the modern day manifestation of that, to me, is like, it doesn't even seem to be based on what was claimed to have happened in the Bible. But people who do it say you get very caught up into it. It's a very emotional, powerful, ecstatic. I'm sure someone out there is studying the neurology, the neurological basis for this. It'd be fascinating to learn more about that. Yes, in the back.
Is there a connection with the speaking in tongues and the Tower of Babel?
Yes, in a sense there is. The question was, is there any connection to the speaking in tongues and the Tower of Babel? Kind of symbolically, and as kind of a literary device. The Christians have traditionally seen what happened on the day of Pentecost as a reversal of the Tower of Babel. You guys familiar with the Tower of Babel? Yes. And in fact, I was in June. I was visiting with Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks. Do you know him? Yeah. And he was telling me that it was the Tower of Babel story that was like the nail in the coffin for him as a young man with the whole belief in God thing. Because here he had these people that were like doing something amazing and striving to build this great tower and do something wonderful and getting together and working on it. And he comes down and destroys the project. And so, how could you believe in a God that is like just, stomping on people and not rewarding them for doing something, like using their creative abilities? But that's allegedly, that's how all the languages of the earth, according to the book of Genesis, was that God ruined their building project by giving them these different languages they couldn't understand each other. So, kind of symbolically, the day of Pentecost, 50 days after Easter, completes the circle. It's seen as the reversal of Babel. Yes? Okay.
If you don't have time to go to a Pentecostal service and watch it, listen to Ray Stevens' Mississippi Squirrel. It'll give you a good idea.
Yes, I've heard that on XM radio. Don't they do that sometime on there? Yeah, that's a good one.
If you can listen to it and not laugh till the tears run down your face, you're not human.
It's a good one. Okay. Well, that was quite the digression, but it's okay. Ask away. That's good. Well, okay. So anyway, the Pentecostals today tend to view more of this. Okay. Well, part of it is the rapid growth of Pentecostalism. They see as evidence of God reclaiming the earth. So they've got this notion that like we're growing so fast and people are speaking in tongues and healing all over the place. It's a sign that God is coming and reclaiming and taking back the earth. So it's kind of moved back to this, the old postmillennialist. Oh, hang on a second. Okay, the other thing. Okay, so the reason we call it postmillennialist. Okay, millennium being 1,000-year kingdom. Post obviously after, which means it's a reference to when they think the rapture will happen. They think the rapture will happen after the millennium. That's why they're called post-millennialists. Okay? Now what's interesting here is it's not only the Pentecostals that are pushing this view today, but starting in the 1970s, there were a branch of the old Presbyterian Church started to develop a theology called Christian Reconstruction and also called Dominion. Well, the Pentecostals call this dominion theology, because in the book of Genesis it says God gave them dominion over the plants of the field and the animals of the earth. So it's this notion that this expansion of God's dominion and human dominion is called dominion theology. Out of the Presbyterian tradition, it became Christian Reconstruction, also Neo-Calvinism, which advocates, and you gotta listen to this is happening out there. And I'm not getting political, okay? But after the election, for a few days, I was becoming complacent. Because I was becoming a post-millennialist about secularism, the march of secularism in our world. And feel like after the election, we maybe beat back some of the, nutcases. They ain't giving up. The fight is not over. We cannot take this for granted. And Neo-Calvinists, and there are actually, believe it or not, a lot of young Neo-Calvinists out there. There's a church, a mega church in Seattle, Washington, called Mars Hill Church. The pastor is Mark Driscoll. Google him, look up some of the sermons they're teaching out there. And they market this, they're all like, wearing leather and pierced snow. We're cool and hip and all that kind of stuff. And it's old school patriarchal Old Testament theology. Like crazy. Mark Driscoll, I assume this is going out on the internet, I don't care anymore. It's, I'll just slander everybody. Anyway, you can find a sermon he gave online to his congregation where he admonishes fathers in his church who are stay-at-home dads and says they are not worthy fathers because they are not doing their their divine responsibility of providing for their families. And any man who stays at home while his wife works, even if he's caring for the children, is not doing his God-intended role, and he should come under church discipline. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He has another sermon out there called "God Hates You." It's a great sermon. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How about they wear blood fabrics at the same time as they're taking care of their kids?
Pardon?
Cotton polyester blends.
Oh, polyester blends, yeah. Well, that kind of gets to this point because the ultimate goal of the Neo-Calvinist movement, he was making a reference to the fact that in the 613 commandments of the Torah, there's a prohibition against wearing blends. Like you can't wear fabrics of different kinds. Like you can't wear a polyester blend. It has to be like all wool, 100% wool, 100% cotton. That's Leviticus. Yeah, that's Leviticus, yeah. So, but the ultimate goal of Neo-Calvinism, this movement I'm talking about, started by a guy named John Piper at a mega church in Minneapolis. He's a little bit older than Mark Driscoll, the same line, is the establishment of God's dominion on earth, the establishment of a theocracy, flat out.
and the reinstatement of biblical law. So, in a sense, an Old Testament Sharia law in the United States. That's out there. So,
Can I pass?
yeah. That's postmillennialism. A couple prominent, well, I mentioned a couple prominent examples like John Piper. Another one would be the evangelist Kenneth Copeland. And Pat Robertson is actually a postmillennialist. Pat Robertson is not in the Left Behind camp, believe it or not. He's in this line of thinking about end times. Okay, what else about, okay, now I asked enough of those guys. Okay, now we get to the really big one. I was saving the best to last. And they're going to need the entire dry erase board. These would be the pre-millennialists. Now, this would be the vision of the future laid out in Left Behind, which apparently tens of millions of Americans think is true, like nonfiction. So when we say pre-millennialists, under this version, the rapture, that is, true believers in Jesus Christ getting sucked up into heaven. And if you want to hear the scripture reference on that later, I'll show it to you because it's kind of vague. I mean, you kind of wonder, how do they get rapture out of this? But anyway, this camp believes that the rapture is going to happen before the tribulation. So you can have rapture, so all the believers get out of there before the bad stuff happens, which puts a huge premium on conversion. People in the premillennialist camp really, really big on conversion, because you want to get your friends and your neighbors and your coworkers safely into the rapture boat. So that's a big emphasis in those groups. And then you have the tribulation, the 7 years of tribulation, and then you will have the 1,000-year reign after that. And then you have Armageddon and Satan let out of prison, and then the second coming. Okay, so and under the premillennialist vision, then, when the Christians get raptured out on the rapture, the living and the dead saints who are now with Jesus while the tribulation is going to start, well, they go through 7 years of tribulation, they will reign with him for the 1,000-year kingdom. So it's not just Jesus reigning, but you get so this is another incentive to convert, because if you get raptured out as a true believer, you're guaranteed a job in the new administration. Because you're going to help administer the 1,000-year kingdom. And you can see how that would be, if you're like maybe a low status person in our society that feels bad about themselves, and you have like self-esteem issues and that kind of stuff, if you have this hope of having an important job in the millennial kingdom, that sounds like pretty good, you know. And so now the other thing about this millennial kingdom that we need to remember is that it is a earthly kingdom with an earthly headquarters, and that earthly headquarters is where? Jerusalem. Jerusalem. Someone said Washington. That's a good guess. Good guess. It is Jerusalem, and we'll talk about that too in a minute. Okay, now the only thing that the premillennials cannot agree on, and this is where it gets really confusing, because you already have to remember amillennialists and postmillennialists and premillennialists, but now you have to think about 3 different types of premillennialists that are out there today, because they cannot agree on the timing of the rapture. So you have pre-trib, post-trib, and mid-trib. Premillennialists. I kid you not. And these people all like get into serious fights with each other on talk shows, on religious television, on radio, in
theological journals. A question back there, and then Andrew. Yes.
Yes. Okay, so where are the Mormon and the Catholic churches in all of these different
Okay,
groups?
the Catholic Church would be on the amillennialist side. The Catholic Church tends to see the existence of the church itself as a manifestation that Augustine talked about the kingdom of the sword and the kingdom of the spirit and the kingdom of the church. That God rules the world through two main vehicles, the kingdom of the right and the kingdom of the left. And so civil power and spiritual power. So the Roman Catholic Church tends to equate the structure of the church itself as a divinely instituted mechanism for God to rule the spiritual affairs of humanity. So they would see that as a present day manifestation of the kingdom. Hence all the royal regalia that is worn, that, if you've been to the Vatican, the whole thing is just, yeah, it's gross. It's just, I mean,
The wealth.
it was visiting the Vatican was one of the nails in the coffin for me too, in terms of my journey. It was astonishing. But the whole thing is to intimidate you. The size of the buildings, the opulence, the whole, and then the altar, I forget the technical word for the area above the altar, but engraved above, way up there in the sky above the altar, at St. Peter's Basilica, in letters that are like 8 feet tall. Each letter 2 feet taller than me or so. It says, "To Eris Petrus, you are Peter." What are they talking about? Well, the guy who sits on that throne. It's like the voice of heaven saying, this guy is the rock on which the Church of Christ. You know the other term for the Pope? He is the vicar of Christ. That's the most this chutzpah, I don't know, I mean, to claim that there is a human being who is the substitute for Jesus Christ on earth, the second person of the Trinity. I mean, so that's amillennialism, that's the kingdom here. Now, when we said with Mormonism, I was going to talk, if we have time later, I was going to talk a little bit about Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm not exactly sure what Mormon eschatology is about this world. I know that the whole idea is that you go off and get your own planet, and you and your spirit wives populate that planet. And we have any ex-Mormons here tonight that want to talk about that? Can you speak to the Mormon understanding of the end of life and this? I don't hear about planet Kobol or wherever, but like planet Earth. But can you speak to that or?
Well, I think they believe that during the millennium there'll be all types of religions on the earth.
Okay.
At the end of the millennium, Satan will be released and there'll be a final battle.
Yeah, I mean that's the same thing. Satan will be released, final battle. Yeah.
No, that's not really a rapture. That's
Okay.
why they have those big food storage things. They store for about a year or so.
Well, this is the thing. This is okay. I don't get this either. Within the Christian world, of people, like you see this on television all the time, not just on the religious shows, but they'll do special interest stories on people who are preparing for the tribulation by stocking up on food and weapons and this kind of thing. Well, if you think God is coming to do battle with Satan, why do you have to stock up on AK-47s? And then why do you want to plan on surviving here if the tribulation is coming? The whole point is to escape the tribulation. And see, I usually enjoy doing these things, but after spending a couple days in Revelation, I kind of feel like you guys owe me something tonight. My brain is fried. Yeah.
So Mormon belief is that everybody goes through the tribulation that's alive on earth, and then afterwards, those who were either converted posthumously or pre come back to the earth and enjoy the reign of Christ.
Okay, no, that's something also I forgot to mention that with the premillennialist up here. And let me tell you, the premillennialism is the dominant view of end times in evangelical Christianity today. This is the dominant thing. Amillennialism that I talked about at the beginning was the dominant view for like 2,000 years. And in a couple minutes we're going to talk about how this took over. And the reason we're talking about this impacts all of us every day, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not. And that's why we have to know about this. But getting back to what you just said, that's the thing with the rapture is there is a belief, even though all the true believers in Jesus are going to be sucked up into heaven on the rapture, there will be people who are left behind who will have an option to convert even during the time of tribulation. So there is even still some hope for the people who are left behind.
Don't they have the mark of the beast? Those guys don't have to be
And no, anyone with the mark of the beast is toast. No hope. Okay. Okay. Oh, so pre-tribulation, I pretty much just did that. Oh, the interesting thing about this is that they believe that the rapture is going to happen before the tribulation. Believers are going to escape all the suffering on earth. But apparently Jesus didn't get the memo on that one, because in Mark chapter 13 and Matthew chapter 24, when Jesus predicts the end of time, he clearly states that everybody is going to go through some time of a period of horrendous suffering on earth before the elect are taken up to be with him. So it appears to be a different timetable. The pre-tribulation people kind of just ignore that, or they get around it by saying, oh, well, he's going to come back twice, okay, which is their standard response for inconsistencies in the Bible. Well, he'll do it again. Okay. Mid-rapture people think that, and this is so odd, based on an obscure passage in the Old Testament book of Daniel, where there's a reference to a 42-month period after a peace treaty is signed. And this is why anytime there is a peace treaty signed in the Middle East, lots of evangelicals in this country aren't really liking it at all. Or they are for bizarre reasons. But anyway, the belief here is that the rapture, just take my word for it, they think the rapture is going to happen halfway through the tribulation. So 3.5 years into the tribulation is when the rapture. And then finally there's a post-tribulation group of premillennialists who think that all Christians are going to have to go through the tribulation with everybody else, but then the rapture is going to happen. And like I said, 3 distinct groups that are out there. You can look them up. Now, a couple examples of this crowd would be obviously Tim LaHaye of the Left Behind series, Hal Lindsey, Late Great Planet Earth, John Hagee, Cornerstone Church in San Antonio. Hugely influential figure, still. Big premillennialist. Now this is interesting. Where did all this come from? If this was not the dominant view of end times for most of the history of Christianity, not that the other version was any better or more logical, I'm not saying that at all, but where did this new thing come from all of a sudden? There's a couple things. Oh, Andrew, I missed, you had a question, Andrew, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just curious, your former clerical career, which side you fell on?
I was an amillennialist. I was clearly an amillennialist. I felt that Revelation was symbolic, never literal, and I actually did believe, and I kind of still believe to this day, that a lot of what he was talking about was reference to contemporary events in his time. I mean, Babylon, clear reference to Rome, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not defending it, but it's stupid. Okay. I really wish that, but you know, Revelation has a checkered history. The reformer Martin Luther, he was pretty loose with the Bible, and he had several books of the Bible he felt should not be in there, including the book of James, which he called the Epistle of Straw. He didn't think the book of Esther should be in there. He had grave reservations about Revelation. Shortly after the Reformation started, he sent around a little memo to the preachers in his area telling them, yeah, don't even touch Revelation. We're not going there. John Calvin, who wrote, you know, just prolifically on all kinds of church-related, especially biblical commentaries, never wrote a commentary on the book of Revelation. Interesting. That was not, he just didn't accidentally forget to write about Revelation. And so it's had a very checkered history. Now, getting back to where the premillennialist thing came from all of a sudden out of the blue, it actually all started with one guy
John Nelson Darby. Anyone heard of him before? I know Muhammad has, because he mentioned him one time. Yeah. John Nelson Darby. Anyone heard of him?
He was a clown, wasn't he?
A clown?
No.
Oh, that was John Wayne Gacy. A few years ago, I attended a lecture by Clint Van Zandt. He's the crime analyst on NBC. He's a former FBI guy. He's on the Today Show like every other day, analyzing some crime thing. And he did this whole lecture about like mass murderers and killing sprees, and how an abnormally high number of mass murderers have 3 names. And he went through the whole list, and it was.
Well, don't most people have 3 names? It's just that we know what their third one is.
Well, no, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. If you go by 3 names, stay away. Okay. Right. So, John Nelson Darby, Irishman, ex-Anglican priest, lived in the mid-1800s, and he's a guy who studied this stuff, and he was the one primarily responsible for looking at the book of Ezekiel in the Old Testament, written 6th century BCE, book of Daniel in the Old Testament, written 2nd century BCE, book of Revelation, and then 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, where he got the notion of the rapture. John Nelson Darby is the guy who coined the phrase the rapture. Really. It really does not exist prior to him. You don't hear Thomas Aquinas or Luther or Calvin or Augustine talking about the rapture. Not until the mid-1800s do we get this word, this concept, which is now omnipresent in American Christian life. So much so that Tim LaHaye can sell tens of millions of copies, I kid you not, of fiction that he doesn't even write. He has like his ghostwriter who works with him, and he just gives he's like the theological coach on this whole project. All started with this one guy. And what he did was, he looked at all these things, and he came up with this scheme that he called dispensations. And he looked at the Bible and at human history, and he divided the whole of human history into what he called 7 dispensations, 7 different periods or epochs, where God dealt with humanity through different covenants. So like he dealt with a different covenant with the people of Israel, then he dealt with the church, dealt with a different covenant with the people before Israel was formed. And so, and this is where we get the name dispensationalism. The premillennialists, the postmillennialists, they're all different forms of dispensationalists who have adopted John Nelson Darby's understanding of the way God works in human history. And according to this scheme, he's the one who laid out how it's all going to happen in terms of rapture and tribulation and millennial kingdom and Armageddon and then second coming and final judgment. He's the one who laid it all out, put it all together. Up until the mid-1800s, nobody had really put it that way before. Now, John Nelson Darby brought these ideas to the United States in 1862, but they really didn't catch fire. I mean, he had some impact, he had some audience, but, and this is another interesting tidbit. He founded a small fundamentalist group called the Plymouth Brethren that never really took off. But if I remember correctly, I think Garrison Keillor was raised in that sect, the Plymouth Brethren. Garrison Keillor was not raised a Lutheran. He was raised in a fundamentalist group, and it may have been the group that John Nelson Darby started. Well, anyway, but where his ideas took off was when the wildly popular Scofield Study Bible was published in 1909. You can go to any Christian bookstore today and still get an updated version of the Scofield Study Bible, the most influential study Bible and in the evangelical world. And John Nelson Darby's schema of human history got incorporated into the notes of the Scofield Study Bible, and it took off. So that's one major influence on why all of a sudden rapture theology went haywire in the United States. And then there's one other thing that really added fuel to the fire. And it happened in 1948. What? The establishment of the State of Israel. That's
what really made rapture theology take off. Because, as I mentioned before, the millennial kingdom is going to be based where? In Jerusalem. Jesus can't come again until the temple gets rebuilt. The temple, which was destroyed what year? 70 AD. Temple, there's a minor impediment to rebuilding the temple, and it's called the Dome of the Rock. You're with me. Third holiest site in Islam. There's a pastor in San Antonio who I think would love to see the Dome of the Rock blown up. And there's a bunch of people that wouldn't care if World War III started, because they would see it as vindication and a sign that the plan is moving forward. So 1948, the establishment of Israel, huge, huge, huge thing. Yes, Andrew.
Well, do they count 1948 as the start of a new dispensation?
That's a good question. I'd have to go back and check. Probably some do. Yeah. You know what's interesting is, you know, Isaac Newton, in addition to being a brilliant, you know, physicist, mathematician, whatever, he was into this stuff too. And he came up with his own plan for the future. He thought the world was going to end in 1944. Isaac Newton did. And what is interesting is he made, in this whole business, he's the only person who made a semi-accurate prediction. I mean, it was not based on anything, it was just luck. But he predicted that something like a restoration of Israel would happen in like the 1890s. And the date that he picked kind of eerily coincided with the beginning of the Zionist movement in Eastern Europe. That's just pure coincidence. I think they would see this as the beginning of a new dispensation, if I vaguely remember that. But it was a huge threshold. It is. I mean, it's huge. So that's.
They don't view it as a beginning of dispensation. They view it as the countdown for Armageddon.
Yeah. How are we doing for time? Oh, we're doing well.
We need to take a break in about 7 minutes.
We have to take a break in 7 minutes? Okay. How long a break do we need to take?
A minute.
A minute, okay. Next portion of my talk is called Why Should We Care? And I think we should.
Do you want to take the break now?
Yeah, why don't we? Yeah, can you guys hang on to your questions? And we'll take a quick break.